Get Pucked. Hello and welcome to Get Pucked Podcast. Here with Vito and Dave, I'm Matt, and let's talk about the Habs. Boys, at 4-12-2, the team is off to the worst start in the franchise's history. A franchise that is over 100 goddamn years old. So obviously this is very fucking bad. So my question to you is, how are heads not rolling? Like, what is Molson doing? How is there no change at the front office to address what is currently happening? What the hell's happening?
Well, good questions. I mean, first off, I think, the first person in this scenario to go would probably be Dominique Ducharme, right? The head coach doesn't have a very good record. But who's going to fire him? Does Marc Bergevin have the power to fire him? Does Marc Bergevin, is he up to hiring his replacement yet again? How many coaches is Marc Bergevin going to get? The question to me is, the answer is simple to your question. Is the reason heads haven't rolled is because I don't think they know who's going to be the general manager next year, at least not yet.
But at least fire somebody. Fire Bergevin and make someone interim.
They just fired the goalie coach. You can't fire the goalie coach again. You can't fire. There's no one to fire, really. I mean, you want to fire Alex Burrows? You just hired him. It would look extremely bad on you to just randomly pick somebody to fire that you just.
I agree.
You're all new. Everyone is new. I mean, it just. You kind of played your hand. You fired Claude Julien. You put Dominique Ducharme as an interim basis. And I think where they went wrong is they overvalued that cup run. That cup run made Ducharme almost untouchable in Bergevin's eyes, and he got the new contract. And now it's like you're kind of handcuffed. Are you going to fire this guy?
Look at his record.
Into his new contract. That's a tough sell for any owner who's already paying Claude Julien. He's still paying Claude Julien just for the overall look. Who's going to replace him? That's another look. You can't just pick somebody random and fire them for the sake of firing, unfortunately. And I mean, I think right now Jeff Molson can at least point on the injuries. You can say, look, I didn't have Carey Price. Look, I didn't have, everyone went down. Hoyne's down. Hoffman's down. They didn't start the season with Hoffman. Things didn't pan out the way they wanted to pan out. I guess they're on goaltender number 4 on the depth chart. So for now they could point to that, but I think that, the firing has to be, the change has to be made, or the decision has to be made at the general manager position before you'll see any type of change. And I don't think they have the answer themselves, to be honest. So that's my answer.
If the Habs didn't have such a bad defensive core, then I'd say maybe Luke Richardson. He's overstayed his welcome, but can I really blame Luke Richardson after having the defensive core that he has? Like, what can you really say? So, I mean...
Well, but let's also be honest for a second, man. Firing the defensive coach or firing Burrows is not going to do anything. I think I'm more saying how is the general manager and the head coach, how do they still have jobs? That's my actual question. I mean, like I understand that they don't have somebody to replace Bergevin right this second, but put yourself. Okay,
so
I don't care. Do something.
I wouldn't put Molson there. And
I wouldn't either.
The thing is that if you do fire, say, Bergevin at this point in the season, who are you replacing him with? And one thing we know, because of the candidates that we have or the lack thereof, it's going to take time to just replace Marc Bergevin. This is something that should have been addressed before the season, where if you're going to keep Marc Bergevin, then keep him. If you're not going to keep him, then move on and find somebody, and don't make him make such big moves during the offseason. Instead, they decided to keep him for this year, and we'll figure things out like they're playing a game of chicken in terms of negotiations. Figure it out. Now, Ducharme, yes, Dave's right on that. The Stanley Cup run helps him out. He got a contract, but it hurts the Montreal Canadiens. Then again, should we treat it the same way as it's not the first time where we hear a coach wins the Jack Adams and then shortly after he's let go. They could maybe treat it the same way, but the problem is that Jeff Molson, the guy who's writing out the checks, is paying Claude Julien still. So how many coaches do you want to have on your salary cap?
But come on, man. At some point, inaction is worse than any action, even if it's the wrong action. You're sitting here. You're 4-12-2. The Canadians are a bus on fire with everybody inside trying to bang to get out, and the fire guys are standing there. They're the management, and they're like, well, you know what? Maybe they can figure it out.
But they're so far along. Yeah, but they're so far along in the season. I think they were running running with the mindset that they were thinking that, okay, it's gonna fix itself. They're gonna get a bit better and get a couple of wins, and they're gonna get on a roll. But now we're getting to a point where they've dug so much of a deep hole that there's no getting out of it. Unlikely at least that they're going to get out of it with the roster that they currently have.
The season spiraled out of control, basically. And I think that, no one really on their terms, although maybe they should have seen it. And I think a lot of people did see it coming with the center position and the defensive position, but they thought that they could probably coast until Carey Price got back. Obviously, they didn't count on him going in, into the player program. They didn't count on that. Then all of a sudden that happens. Okay, maybe they could coast. And then, he comes back and makes a difference. And all of a sudden now you're looking at 4 wins in 18 games, and there's a problem. The main problem is that there's nobody left that you could put an interim tag on. So if you're Jeff Molson and you don't know your Bergevin situation, and you don't know, and you want to get rid of the coach, let's just say that's you've looked at what Deschamps has got to offer, and he hasn't performed, so you want to get rid of him. Who are you going to put there in the interim? You can't hire a full-on head coach right now. You don't have a general manager yet, so you have to hire someone from the interim. We all know it's not going to be Luke Richardson with who can't speak French.
No, Ducharme's not going anywhere. It's a Bergevin situation, and I think at this point it's actually comically ridiculous that hasn't been addressed. Either give him a contract for 2 years or whatever, let everybody know that he's still the guy running the boat, and let him make moves and let him do something. Or get rid of him, make somebody else interim, make it very understanding that this is an interim position, somebody who's just there to make sure that the position is filled, understand that no big moves will happen until trade deadline, unload what you can for the best that you can, and move on with life.
The thing is, Matt, you're better off at this point, if you're going to bring somebody on the interim, you're better off keeping Marc Bergevin, who's got GM experience, than having somebody who's got no GM experience.
His GM experience has led this team to a 4-12-2 goddamn start, man.
Yeah, you could look at it that way. You could also look at it as his GM experience is the last GM to get a team or build a team to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Don't talk to me what he did last year. I don't want to hear last year. I like Bergevin. Don't get me wrong, and I think there even is a position for him as potentially the new president of hockey ops and get Molson completely removed from the situation. There's potentially a spot for him there. But at the end of the day, my problem with this team right now, besides the fact that they are, like, on most nights, a dumpster fire to watch, the inaction of management, the no press conference, no nothing, and I get if he does it, he's just going to get rid.
That's the weird thing.
You have to say something.
That's strange.
And now, speaking of people that are acting and being completely invisible, well, actually, sometimes I think he hopes he was invisible. What the hell's going on with Jeff Petry?
Smooth transition. I like that segment.
Back. Here's Larkin on the backhand. Oh, and he takes Allen out hard.
So that was a clip of Jeff Petry turning Dylan Larkin into a goddamn tactical missile and firing him right into Jake Allen. Like, terrible, terrible play, terrible judgment. The guy is invisible during the course of the game. When he's on the power play, he has blinders on and only goes for monster shots from the blue line through 19 bodies. What the hell, guys? What happened to this dude?
I don't think he was prepared to be the number one guy. And I think it's messed him up to a point that he's playing the way that we're seeing him play. I mean, we know Jeff Petry's not that bad. We know he's one of the best, if not the best skaters on the Montreal Canadiens.
I thought I did.
But something happened to him to start the season. I don't know if it's because he's still injured or if he's still hungover from that Stanley Cup run. Whatever the case may be, he's not the Jeff Petry that we've seen in years past. There's something off, and he's shooting through people. He's making mistakes that you don't normally see him make. I mean, he's never was the perfect defenseman, but he wasn't this bad. He's atrocious right now, and unfortunately, he's hurting the team more than he's helping the team. So I had suggested and wrote something on Twitter not that long ago that maybe it would be a good thing to sit him out 1 or 2 games. Now, I know they're not going to do that, but it probably wouldn't hurt him to say, sit out 1 or 2 games, collect yourself, and come back in 1 or 2 games. Now, people are starting to question whether last year people were saying Petry made Edmondson look good. Is it the other way around?
I mean, I think you made some good points there, Vito. in the sense that he was not the perfect defenseman, right? I think that we have a tendency in this market to maybe overrate some players here and there. And Jeff Petry is a very, very good defenseman. He was underrated for a very long time. They got him as a steal. It was a great move to get him. But I mean, I think, we tend to forget that there was times when, even at his best, Jeff Petry, during his best seasons, he would disappear for games and he wouldn't have great games. Or, there would be, stages.
Not this long a stretch, right?
No,
these many egregious errors.
No, of course, so I personally think he's playing a little bit hurt from what it looks like, and it's crazy to see, because so many times, I'm a guy, I wear glasses, right? But I don't like wearing my glasses. So I watch the games and sometimes I'm squinting. I'm like, oh, who was that? And so many times this year, I'm like, oh, wow, that ends up being Jeff Petry that made that blatant mistake or made that stupid play. And it's flabbergasting. And I'm just, Jeff, I think that we're seeing Jeff Petry at his ultimate worst, and he needs to get out of his own head, and maybe sitting him is the right thing. Maybe, taking a little, injury break, it would be good for him. But it's been brutal for Jeff Petry, and I can't even pinpoint what's wrong, other than the fact that maybe there's too much pressure on him, and he's putting too much pressure on himself, and he's in his own head. But
I'll tell you what's wrong. I know what's wrong with Jeff Petry. You guys want to know? Here's your inside. Here's your inside scoop about Jeff Petry.
I didn't know you were in the room.
I do know.
You live at Casa Petry.
No. This is what has to happen. Molson, whoever, all right, it has pulled him aside and said the season's off, like worst start in franchise history. I need
your conspiracy theories.
I need you to be my tank commander. I need you to be my guy in the ice to just don't pass the puck. You push your guy into the goalie, into the only thing that was kind of keeping the team somewhat afloat. I kind of pushed the Russian guy into him. That's what I think's happening. It's either that, or someone needs to find a private detective and go find the real Jeff Petry, who's tied up in a basement somewhere, and this fucking whoever they found on the street and made him look like Jeff Petry, who maybe he's never even played hockey in his life. That guy is an imposter. But these are the two scenarios.
Those are the only two scenarios.
That's the only two scenarios that make sense.
There's no other scenario that he might be injured. No. Okay, we're gonna go with this unrealistic bullshit that you just came up with.
No, those are the only two. And until somebody proves me wrong, that's what I'm sticking with.
And okay. I don't know which of you mentioned his play on the power play, but Jeff Petry. There was long stretches last year in the playoffs. He wasn't even on the first power play unit. I don't know if you remember, for most of the time. Like they don't really use him much, on the power play anyway. So I just think maybe it is. Maybe someone kidnapped him. You have a tank commander, whatever you want to do.
I'm telling you.
But I mean, if the Canadians want any chance of turning this season around, they're going to have to get more from Jeff Petry. Absolutely. And the problem is also, if you're on tank mode, is that his value is going right down. You're talking about tanking the team. His trade value is tanking as well. So
maybe they see him as a core piece and they weren't going to move him, right? Maybe they winked. Okay, don't worry, Jeff. You're going to be around for the next edition. We signed you for a bit of term.
Would you count Jeff Petry as part of your?
I would not. I still think right now he has the chance of stabilizing his game. Where if they get to trade deadline, he'll net you back some really good reserves.
But hold on a second. They're paying him like they think he's part of the core.
Well, they got a good
at the time. Yeah,
a good deal
at the time.
They're paying him a little over $6 million, which is fine.
He,
and at the
he
time,
would have gotten more had he gone to the free.
100%. But right now, listen, there's got to be something with Jeff Petry. There has to be something. But that's the thing now. We're at the point now where we're all questioning, coming up with assumptions, conspiracies in Matt's case.
No, I don't know about that.
That I almost feel it's time that they come out and say, yes, he's playing injured. Yes, there's something there.
They're never going to come out and say
they're never going to do it. But we're at that point where we've got to stop treating the team like it's the CIA and we have all these secrets going on. Just let people know a little bit. Just let them know a little bit. At least give them something to point to or a reason why shit's not working with a specific player. Especially we're talking about Jeff Petry. It's like he fell off a cliff. Or his decline happened overnight. That's how he's playing right now. And yeah, Dave, you mentioned that he didn't play on the first power play, but he played on the second power play, and now he is on the first. So is it too much pressure? Is being the number one guy killing him?
There's no way that this is a pressure thing.
And previous year, we said, okay, it's Shea Weber's the number one guy. And then people started saying, no, Jeff Petry is the number one guy. But in that locker room, they probably still looked at it as Shea Weber's the number one guy.
Ben Sherratt is our number one defenseman right now.
Well, our defensive core was built terribly. It's a terrible, terrible defensive core. Yes, we're missing Edmondson. Yes, okay, fine. The moment they found out that Shea Weber wasn't coming back, you go take whatever money you can.
They did.
Work it out. And
they brought David Savard.
They did bring David Savard to make up for certain elements that Shea Weber left.
God. What elements? The fact that he can skate?
I don't think they expected.
And I don't mean
Savard to be that
quickly.
bad
I
either.
mean actually the ability to put on skates and move forward.
That's
all he has in common with Shea Weber.
Okay,
I don't care what
second.
anybody tells me.
I don't think they expected David Savard to be that bad. Some people are even suggesting and giving the benefit of the doubt that he is hungover from winning a Stanley Cup. I'm one of those people that are looking at David Savard and say he is a 4 on a good day, but on an everyday 5-6.
He's super miscast on this team.
But every player is, Matt.
No. Well, okay. And you know what? Speaking of miscast,
we've been miscasting players for the last 20 years.
Okay, fine. So this just came out today. All right? Our hope, our savior from the waiver wire of a couple weeks ago, Adam Brooks. Adam Brooks is gone. He played 4 games with the Habs. I think he had 1 assist. He was hardly used properly when he was here. He played minimal minutes. And now you took him off the waiver, and he's back in the waiver. He gets claimed by Vegas. What were they trying to do? Were they just trying to give the finger to the Leafs? Did they actually have a plan for this guy? Or did he straight up just was the victim of somebody else's success, and the extension of Ryan Poehling just forced this guy out? There was no need for him.
I think he filled a need that they needed, right? They needed a centerman. They needed a guy. I think they were probably hoping he would play that 4th line center role, or maybe even creep up to a 3rd line center role. And for whatever reason, as soon as he got here, they didn't like him. It was clear from the beginning that they just didn't like him. And to me, it's telling, because in Toronto, he was well liked. The coaches liked him. The fans really liked him.
They were reluctant to put him on the waiver. Yeah,
for sure. And he was a guy, obviously he's not a world beater. This is another Bergevin special bottom 6 acquisition. He wasn't going to save the Canadiens. Don't get me wrong.
No,
but
for sure.
You figured he would get into the lineup somehow and play some minutes, and they just never really gave him a chance, an opportunity whatsoever.
So what were they thinking?
Well, I think they were hoping. I think Bergevin looked at him, said, I like him as a player, gave him to Dominique Ducharme. Dominique Ducharme had a couple of practices with him, didn't fit the system. That's what I really honestly think.
But what the fuck is that?
I don't want to go back to this, but what the fuck is the system?
Well, call it a system. Maybe just didn't like him. I don't know what it is, but it didn't. Adam Brooks never got an opportunity here.
He never got a single true opportunity to play. That's one of those things. You go to the store, you see something nice, you're like, oh, those shoes look great. You put the shoes on. Oh, the shoes feel good too. You bring them home. All of a sudden, you realize the size was like 3 sizes too small, and it's some god awful color. You're like, what the hell was I thinking? Like, that's literally what just happened.
Often with this guy. Matt?
I don't know if it happens often, but that's basically what fucking happened with this guy.
Okay, but at the same time,
you're like, oh, this guy is gonna slot in as 3C on this team.
Yeah,
I'm going to take something that.
Over him.
Hold on. I'm going to take something that Dave said in the previous episode. The guy is an NHLer. He came in 4 games. Right. 4 games. He had 4 games in whatever limited amount of ice time that he had. He had 4 games to prove himself and take a spot. And he didn't. And he was a center who had 16% in the faceoff circle. 16 and 0 shots in 4 games. You're telling me you couldn't just dump a puck on a goalie? 0 shots in 4 games.
Okay, well, hold on a second. Let me ask you this. If Ryan Poehling doesn't get the nod to call up, and if he doesn't play as well as he's been playing, is Adam Brooks still on this team?
Probably still on the team, but not playing more. I don't think Ryan Poehling stole his spot necessarily. Maybe he stole the spot on the roster, but he didn't steal a spot in the lineup. I think Adam Brooks was not part of the Canadiens' plans whatsoever, and I just think that they were ready to move on with him, and whoever could replace him. Ryan Poehling's here. Boom. He's there. Mathieu Perreault is going to come back, slot him wherever. I don't know. This team will take anybody anywhere, and that's it. Adam Brooks now goes to Vegas. He's not going to be a world beater in Vegas. Not as if the Canadiens
I know
fans on Twitter are like, oh, no, Adam Brooks. He's not going to be a world beater in Vegas either. He was just, I thought, was going to be a useful part. And to Vito's point, maybe he didn't prove himself during game time. But to me, I don't think he was, given the opportunity, really.
It leaves that kind of taste in your mouth. We just talked about it on the last podcast, I think, about Frolik saying he never got his shake. He was thrown into the Wolves, kind of like just out of the blue. Okay, you're in today, and like he's like, well, shit, I got to all of a sudden be the best I could possibly be at a moment's notice, and if I don't do exactly perfectly what the coach wanted me to do, I found myself in the press box again. It's becoming a trend, an ugly trend with this team. And I don't know how much that's going to want to attract other players. You know, the more you come to find out that you got, like, if you don't follow to an absolute T, it's like the young guys too, who are all saying that, you know, we're scared to make a mistake. Like Victor Mete, I think, said it. He says, you know, I'm so happy to be on a team where if you make one little mistake, you're not sitting out for a month. You know, it's just weird, man. I agree with you, Dave. I don't think Adam Brooks was going to bring this team to the promised land. I don't think he was going to all of a sudden become this unbelievable superstar. But it's like, what are they doing? It's like it seems like they're desperate. They're appearing desperate. It appears like they don't have a plan in place.
They are. We chose. They were choosing.
Say,
if you want to even say, they were choosing Paquette over Brooks. And Paquette got hurt, and you're looking and saying, okay, instead of you playing Brooks when you had him, let's call up Paling.
Yeah, they didn't like him. I get it.
Right?
Listen,
so they play Paling, and heck, they look and say, okay, Paling scores a goal. He's playing fine.
Oh, he's been playing.
So now you're looking and say, I'd rather have Paling, who's a Montreal prospect, center the fourth line, be in the NHL and play, drafted by this team, than have either Brooks or Paquette or even Perreault at this point.
Do you think there was maybe a little bit of like in-house favoritism? They wanted to prove like, hey, a guy that we've drafted actually is playing well, and we want him in more than a guy we picked up, especially from the Leafs. Do you think there's a play there at all?
No,
maybe?
You're full of conspiracies tonight.
I'm just asking the question,
fuck?
homie. I'm just saying, what's the deal? Because listen, and this leads in perfectly to what I really wanted to talk about, which is a whole semblance of comparing two different things that people think this team has a major problem with. People are saying that either on one hand, the Habs are terrible at drafting, or the Habs are terrible at developing people. Now, here's a clip.
Jared Konorty, Nathan Beaulieu, Alex Galchenyuk, Michael McCarron, Akita Sherbak, Noah Juleson, Mikhail Sergachev, Ryan Paling,
Jesperi Kotkaniemi,
Cole Caulfield,
Caden Gooley.
Okay, so that was a clip right there of the major first-round picks that the Habs have drafted in the past several years, right? And as you can tell by some of those names, they didn't really pan out. You know, you don't have to look too hard. They didn't really pan out. So I ask you boys, do the Habs have a very, very, very big problem with developing their players after they draft them, or do they simply mislook at how a player is projected to be and they just draft really poorly, or is it a combination of the both of them?
I think it's both. I think if you look at who the players they've drafted, they've made a slew of mistakes, and you know, you could go down in the what ifs and what if they would have drafted this guy over that guy, and there's a whole bunch of them, Kreider over LeBlanc and stuff like that. But also their development is not bad. I mean, like Alex Galchenyuk scored 30 goals in the NHL as a young player. Like the talent was there, I think.
Yep.
It's just what happened to him. He just fell off the cliff. There was the constant mind-numbing debate every single day on TSN 690. Is Alex Galchenyuk a center? Is Alex Galchenyuk a winger?
Oh, yeah. I remember
constantly those. Because this team didn't know what to do with him. And they didn't know if they could trust him with this defensively and this. The guy scored 30 goals early on in his NHL career. The talent is there. Not everyone could score 30 goals in the NHL. You know, only Brendan Gallagher has that many 30-goal seasons, Vito, to come, you know. But not everyone could do it. So the talent sometimes are there. Galchenyuk wasn't necessarily the wrong choice there. It's just somewhere down the line. Same thing with Kotkaniemi. Did they ruin this guy's confidence? Did they ruin? And you go down the list. Do they rush guys? Do they not rush guys? It's just there seems to be a question mark on every single level of the Canadians drafting system. And then there's like the debate on who's actually making the choices. You know, Trevor Timmins would have preferred Chris Kreider, but someone overruled him and picked Louis LeBlanc. And then it's like, Marc Bergevin really, really liked Morgan Riley, but they ended up, and it's just who do you trust? Who's really telling the truth? Who's making the choices? All in all,
holy shit.
To me, it's just you do have a problem on either or. And it's weird to say because they have drafted really good players. Ryan McDonough, obviously, Carey Price. You look at the players that they've drafted, they're good names. But they're not necessarily playing here, and they didn't all necessarily pan out. So to me, I think it's both. And I think that you have to make a decision also on top of that. Like Jeff Molson really has to look at this organization and say, what's next?
It's time to clean house. That's what's next. If
Maybe.
You can actually say that there's problems at both of those situations, then you have the wrong people in place, man.
I also, it will shock you, but I also think they have a problem at pro scouting. So this just makes for a very poor or poorly run. And I don't want to bash anybody. Like, I'm not overly bashing. I'm not being overly negative. I just think that there's a problem at
No, there's a problem at every single section of the organization, but I'm not being negative.
Both are an issue, draft and development. There are picks that were made. There were picks that were made that shouldn't have been made at the spots that they were taken. That's one. Galchenyuk, I agree and disagree with the whole Galchenyuk view because Galchenyuk, although at third overall at the time wasn't a bad pick, there was Forsberg that probably should have been taken ahead of him. But the guy, scored 30 goals, but he didn't really have hockey vision. He's that type of player that puts his head down, goes, and he relies on his shot, and he just hasn't been the same. And clearly you see it. He went to like 6 or 7 other teams, and he's still not able to find his game fully. And you look now, and he's like, how old is he? About 27 years old now?
Yeah, but doesn't that speak to the development?
Well,
Shouldn't that have been the organization's goal, is to keep him back and to train him up instead of rushing him and taking your third overall pick and throwing him into the NHL?
Well, what they should have done is figured out at that point is whether at the beginning, are we going to groom him to be a centerman, or are we going to groom him to be a winger, and not figure it out while he's in the NHL? First thing you do when you draft him is figure out what position are we drafting. We're drafting the best player available, at least we think so, but are we drafting Galchenyuk the center, or are we drafting Galchenyuk the winger? I think he would have been better suited as a winger, but we're so desperate. And we were so desperate for a center that we were ready to plug anybody in the middle that had a bit of size, a bit of shot, and some kind of hockey sense. Like,
well, speaks to Sergachev. Then the desperation for a center, you lose a marquee defenseman like that you actually drafted properly, and you traded him for a guy who isn't actually a center to go play center. Not that I'm knocking Drouin, and I think he is a good player, but to your point, yes, I mean they don't know what the hell to do with these guys.
Montreal's been desperate for a long time, and now they've got a center in Suzuki. They didn't draft him; they traded for him. They still developed him, and they're still developing him, right? The only thing is they got him already partially buffed. You know what I mean? They didn't Vegas did something with him.
I have a question for you on Nick Suzuki. And are you concerned at all a little bit about how he's going to develop as a player playing for the Montreal Canadiens?
Yes.
Are you concerned that in 3 years we're talking about was Nick Suzuki really a first line center, or are you just sold on him already?
I mean, listen, to answer quickly, I love Nick Suzuki. I have high hopes for Nick Suzuki, but my problem with Nick Suzuki, and it's unfortunate because it's not a him problem, it's a Habs problem. I'm scared that he's in the hands of the people that are going to actually cause problems for his career in the long run. I think they might force him to play a style of hockey that doesn't naturally come to him, and it might hold him back, and it might cause future confidence issues like they've done to so many other young players. That's my concern.
I don't think it's an issue with Suzuki. You want to know why? Because he's getting the playing time. It's not one of those. He's not getting benched. He's not getting scratched. They're not giving him any issues. It's not like other players that we've put in the middle or in any position, and he said, "Oh, you made a mistake, bench him." Suzuki's made mistakes. I mean, he made a couple last night, and guess what? He was put right back on the ice. That's the difference with Suzuki versus, say, Galchenyuk or even Kotkaniemi or any other person that we try to plug into a certain position. Suzuki's getting his ice time, and he's allowed to make mistakes. And now that he got that contract, they're basically saying, you make a mistake, it's okay. You're Nick Suzuki. You'll figure it out.
But that's my point, right? He's got money and investment in him now, and he's the number one center. Could you imagine what this city would do if they benched him if he made mistakes in the last game and they said, yeah, you know what, we're going to sit him out, who the hell would they put in his place?
I would say this. If Ducharme decided to bench him for making a mistake, I think that would actually get him fired more so than his record is right now.
Like that's that. Like
I mean, I'm a little
because bench him for who? Bench him for
exactly.
who? They don't even have
That's the
place.
But that's why
Adam Brooks is God, Vito. God.
This is why I'm not worried about his development in that sense. Am I worried about who's the coach that's guiding him? Maybe. I don't think Ducharme is the right guy. We've said this before in a previous episode. So, Dave, to your point, no, I'm not worried about Nick Suzuki, and I do think he's the Habs' number one center, and he's the best center we've had in a very long time. He still has to work on his game. He's only 22 years old. There's still certain things he's got to work on, but he's the best center we've had since Saku Koivu.
But bear in mind, right? And I get Dave's question. It was off on a side there. But talking about drafting versus development, right? They didn't draft him. And when we talk about development, you're actually talking about like putting someone in the organization and going through the ranks and putting them in the places they need to be to learn to be better players. He is thrusted right now in the number one center position at the NHL level. You know what I mean? Like there's not really, I mean, yes, I guess you continue to develop as you play and stuff, but that's not really developing the player, right? He's expected now and he's now being paid to be a top centerman.
But he's also producing.
Well, and that's fine, but he's a one-off, right? You're like he was acquired. That's what I'm saying. Like it's all well and good. We can look at Jeff Petry before this tank abomination season. He was great, but he was acquired. You can look at Paul Byron, who's been around and he's been great, was picked up from the waivers also. Drouin traded for. I mean, how many guys are in-house drafted and developed? Brendan Gallagher, Carey Price. Then that's it, essentially. So, I mean, if that's all you have to show for Lehkonen, I mean, I love Lehkonen. I don't give a shit what you say, how many memes you throw at me. I do, but you can't be throwing Lehkonen at me and telling me, look, that's a success story.
I'm just mentioning guys that were drafted by Montreal and that are currently playing for Montreal.
I mean, you want some names? I got names. I can throw names at you. What happened to Sherbak? What happened to like just not even top round names, but guys that they threw in there and then all of a sudden disappeared? Dillarose, Lars Eller, McCarron.
Do I have to replay the video again for you to remember all the first round picks since 2009?
No, but I'm not even talking first round picks. There should be some big hits in the second round. It's just I feel the same way, guys.
Matt, when it comes to drafting, it always seems like Montreal has either been drafting for a need or they're a step behind everybody else. Now, they draft NHLers, players that actually play in the NHL. Yeah, Timmins is a good record for that. But it seems like it's, with the exception of 2005, where we got Carey Price in that crazy year, in 2007, and most recently, some would even say the second and third rounds of 2018 were pretty good too. But Trevor Timmins, it's quantity, not quality.
That's exactly it. He doesn't hit on his other picks. He hits as everyday NHLers, and it's kind of like the philosophy of the Canadians, very good, serviceable bottom six guys who will play a bunch of games, and you're kind of like, oh, he's good, I like him, I wish he was more. And that's exactly who the type of player they pick. They never hit massively. They never get a Kucherov in the second. You know what I mean? They never hit outside of out in their picks that are outside the first round. They never hit on any of them, really. We go back to Brendan Gallagher. That's probably the last guy, really.
Brendan Gallagher, off the top of my head, I think Brendan Gallagher, Halak. And I think it stops there. Subban was second round.
But again, Subban was a second round. All very, 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 very long time ago. It's just like they don't.
Yeah, man. Like that to me. At the end of the day, if we're all in agreement, and I think many people out there that watch this team and that are invested in the Canadians, when they look at it, they're in agreement. Their draft for whatever reason, they've had very high picks, they've had low and medium round first round picks. Somewhere in there over the course of the last 15 years, they should have nailed a superstar at some point or another. And they haven't. And now you move to development. And even when you got guys with raw potential, like a Galchenyuk that you take third overall and is a 30-goal scorer on pure talent alone, and you couldn't develop him correctly, now that you got these two very distinct problems, how is it that you haven't completely shuffled the whole management and got new people in place? How have these guys survived so long?
And that, to me, just to touch back on what you said there, because it's very good about, when you draft in those second rounds, like, obviously we're not draft experts. We don't watch junior games. Nobody does, right?
Yeah.
But there's always, a buzz around certain players. And every time, if you look at every single draft from the beginning of social media that I can remember to now, every time the Habs select someone, it's always like, oh, that was a good pick. Oh, that was a higher pick than expected. Oh, that was good. Oh, that was a steal. And they never amount to anything, these players, right? So that, I think, speaks a little bit to the development side. Now, talking about how things have not been shuffled, that's a good choice, and that's a good question, and that's a question for Marc Bergevin, and then it's eventually a question for Jeff Molson. And I think, if there's ever a time to just take everything and start fresh, it would be this season.
I would even say I think if there's anybody that it's time for the Montreal Canadiens to move on from, and he'll likely get a job somewhere else, I think it's time to say bye to Timmins. He's been around there a long time. He's been there and seen a lot of our players. Now, whether he agreed with whether he made the choices on certain players or not, he's been there far too long, and it's time for a different voice, a different scout, a different person who's going to bring in a different set of prospects and have a different mindset behind it and try to instill that mindset versus having the same types of character traits or the same types of players that we're bringing in. I watched the 2018 behind the scenes draft, and you got to hear Timmins talking a little bit and some of the things he's looking for, and it's character and the certain physicality and being strong. And all the other scouts are talking to each other, and one scout is saying, "Hey, I would take him in the top top 2, top 3 rounds." One guy's saying, "I wouldn't touch him if he was 7th round pick." At the end of the day, it's time in my opinion, for Timmins to go. More so than Bergevin, more so than Ducharme. It's Timmins. He's been around for a very, very long time.
What do you say to people who look at the team and say, listen, yes, draft and development's a problem, whatever, but when you look at the top 3 picks or top 4 picks of a draft, and most of those guys end up becoming a something, the Habs have been so mediocre, not bad, but not good for so long. They always seem to get these mid-round first picks, and there's yes, they should hit, but the cream of the crop is always being taken before they even get the opportunity. What do you say to that?
Well, Matt, they had 2 third overall picks in the last 10 years, and you know what? Actually, 8 years, and we don't have them at all. They're not even on the team.
So the Galchenyuk year was a bad year, admittedly, right?
Okay, admittedly, but they chose Galchenyuk over somebody like Philip Forsberg, and heck, even Washington chose Martin Erat over Forsberg. It just happens. Yep. You know what I mean? But we had 2 third overall picks. Those are 2 top 5 picks.
Kotkaniemi would still be on this team if he wasn't offer sheeted.
But he was, and you know what? Right now, he's shitting the bed in Carolina as well. He played as a 4th line center last game and only had about 8-9 minutes of play, anyways. So at the same time, you're looking at all that, and yes, there are some mid-level picks that for other teams pan out. Heck, it's panned out quite a few times for teams like Tampa Bay and so on, but it doesn't pan out for Montreal, and it's because I think they're honestly always picking the same types of players like Dave mentioned. It's always something that's based on character. Great, character is great, but you got to also have certain guys that have a certain skill set, a certain talent, because you know what? Character sure plays a big factor, but if the person doesn't have the talent, you know what you end up with? Players like Ben Maxwell. We drafted players like that. We drafted certain players that just, why do we have them? Why? Why did you go for that player over another player? I know there's no sound recipe to any of this. You can't figure it out. There's no perfect recipe for this, but at the same time, it's got to stop.
Yeah, well, look, the Galchenyuk draft, they had Morgan Riley there on the table. He ended up going 5th to the Leafs. Imagine Morgan Riley on this Canadiens roster. It's exactly what they're lacking, really, in terms of a defenseman. And then you look at Kotkaniemi. Kotkaniemi was projected to go 15th overall, and then somebody wrote an article saying that, he could be a number 3, and the Canadiens need a center. Look at that. And then somehow it just
didn't Bob McKenzie at a point have him in his top 10? He had him at 8th. Eventually.
But at the beginning, he was 15th. And then I forget who, but somebody wrote an article about him saying, hey, this is somebody the Canadiens should consider. It would be a reach. And then all of a sudden, everybody jumped on board. And this is why drafting and these draft boards and this and that, until you see them yourself, you're just kind of hoping and wishing. And I think that they really overreached for Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and they could have gotten a better player after him.
Brady
and
Tkachuk.
obviously that's
Well, yeah, we go back to Brady Tkachuk and Quinn Hughes, but all the rumors were pointing to Philip Zadina.
right.
No,
okay.
I understand. I don't want to play revisionist history,
Exactly,
but
exactly.
Dave's making a good point. It's true, right? You never know what you're going to get. Somebody writes something, all of a sudden somebody's tires get pumped, and then you look and, oh, we should look at this guy more and whatever. And it's true. That's an excellent point.
And my point basically is that both of those drafts were driven by need. They needed a center, like Vito said, so they went to go get Galchenyuk over Riley, and they needed a center, so they went to go get Kotkaniemi. And that's somebody's fault. Whose fault that is, only the people internally know, but Jeff Molson should know, and Jeff Molson should.
Are we safe to say that we're fucking fed up? Like,
Yes,
I'm fucking fed up.
I think so. And you know what? Let's end on something a little bit more positive in a hockey sense, right? Speaking of centermans, and the irony is, of course, this isn't even Habs related, but here we are. Do you guys think that Leon Draisaitl is going to be a 50-goal in 50-game player this year? First one since Brett Hull, I think, since the early 90s. Do you think he can do it?
I think he could do it.
Will he do it?
Will he do it?
Will he do it?
Man, I really, really want to say yes. So I'm just going to go with yes. I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to say yes. Look, it's what he and McDavid are doing is absolutely incredible. It's just, I've never seen that before. It's something that, no one could see coming. And the fact that they're doing it with Edmonton is kind of like soul crushing a little bit, although,
carrying that team on their backs.
but it's incredible to watch. And Leon Draisaitl has all the skill in the world, and he's a guy who kind of just crept up. I know he was a high pick and everything, but no one, I don't think, expected him to be this good.
Wasn't there rumors for him for Subban at once upon a time?
No, I think Bergevin was hoping to land that one.
I think that was a fanboy Habs rumor.
Okay,
It was an insider rumor, to be honest. But
okay.
But still, to your point, Draisaitl was kind of that player that was a good center, but no one really knew anything. He's German. No one really knew what he had to offer, and it's incredible what he's doing in Edmonton. And I'd love to see it happen, man. I'd absolutely love to see it happen. I love what they're doing in Edmonton, and they're destroying pools, though. I must say, my biggest question back in the day when the Gretzky years is like, how did you manage that? Like, how did you? Whoever drafted it first overall just gets 100 points extra over everybody else. How is that even fair? And now Connor McDavid and Draisaitl are approaching that territory. Whoever has them in a pool is just ridiculous.
So it sounds like you're a resounding yes. You're a yes. He's going to do it. He's going to do it.
Let's do it. Why not?
Vito, does he do it?
Yeah, I'll say Draisaitl. I'll say Draisaitl does it this year. I think the biggest question, because it got brought up tonight, is hold on a second. Draisaitl is also on pace for 92 goals. That he's not going to do. But he's got a strong chance to hit the 50 goals in 50 games. And at the same time, he's also playing with Connor McDavid. So there's an even stronger chance. But the real question before we wrap this up, is Leon Draisaitl, just simple yes or no, is Leon Draisaitl better than Austin Matthews?
No.
Yes.
I disagree.
Well, you're entitled to it, sir, but you would be wrong.
I say yes. Statistically, at least, he's proven that he's better than Austin Matthews. And
Austin Matthews has such a crazy two-way game that's underrated, man. And I know that, because in the Habs series, it didn't look that way or whatnot, but I think Austin Matthews overall as a hockey player is better.
I think Austin Matthews
not going to get shut down by Phil Deneau, I tell you that much.
I think Austin Matthews would look better with the Arizona Coyotes.
I like those jerseys. So.
Well, yeah. Listen, they got to have something over there. Shit. Oh, we're bad. But, all right, boys. On that happy note, let's bring this to a close here. Good episode. I thank everybody for listening. Again, if you haven't, please check us out on all the places that you get your podcast and consume your media. If you can drop us a like, a subscribe, that'd be great. Spotify, iTunes, all the cool, wonderful places that exist. We really, really would appreciate it. And definitely look forward to our next episode, which will be announced on our social media. So please take a look at that, and you will see when the next one's coming out. So for Dave and Vito, I'm Matt, and this was Get Pucked.